Okay, good evening. Welcome to week 4. And as I was just saying, now we are getting into the meat of the capstone. Before this, we were just doing easy stuff, right? So now we're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of it. And we're going to do our baseline audits for the next 2 weeks. And it's important, I think, to note that, let me put this over here for a second. Week 4 is we're going to be reviewing the introduction chapter all week long. As I mentioned, weeks 4 and 5 are when you are doing your baseline audit. So week 5, there is no overview meeting and there are no feedback sessions unless we are catching up. And then week 6, we're going to review the audit chapter. Now, some of you might not be able to get all your data. Sometimes it takes more than 2 weeks. And so that's why we have a couple of weeks of slop that are built into the project. But I know that you all would like to stay on track as much as possible. So what you're should be thinking about is gathering the data this week, analyzing it next week. So that is how we're going to be doing that. Okay. Try to put myself back over here again because I think this is where it's usually not going to be in the way. Okay, so this is what our agenda is. We're going to first think about critically thinking about your audit. And then we're going to talk about how to conduct the baseline audit and then how to analyze the baseline audit. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions. So thinking critically about audits. This is an amazing website that helps you out, helps you to think critically. It comes from criticalthinking.org. And right now it's not active here, so I'm not going to go to it. But if you look at the slides, or if you just go to the criticalthinking.org /CT model /logic model PHP, and you can get that from here later, you will see that there's a lovely active in that you can hover over each one of these little areas, and it'll give you all kinds of things to think about. So the ones that are most relevant to what we are doing for the next 2 weeks is what's your goal or objective, what's your question that you're trying to answer, the problem that you're trying to solve, what information, data, facts, observations, experiences do you need to collect, and then how are you going to interpret them? And each one of these, if you hover over it, you'll see it comes up with a whole bunch of interesting questions. And obviously not all of them are going to be relevant, but I think you might find some of them helpful. The other thing that I think is really nifty about it is you see these little elements or standards up at the top. These are the elements here, elements of thought. And up top, these yellow things are the standards for clarity, for breadth, for accuracy, for logic, etc. And again, it's just helpful to take a look, and like, for instance, with purpose, you look at the relevant standard and how does that relate to the problem? How does it bear on the question? And how does it help us with the issue? So it's just a nifty tool to use to help you think through, because this is your time when you are going to have to choose the kinds of audits that you should be doing, and you're probably going to be doing more than one, and the ways in which you're going to analyze it and display your results there. And we'll go over a lot of thoughts, but there's still a lot of more thinking that you can do. So you may have seen we have tried to expose you to a lot of audits, and this is just a partial list of some of the audits that we have done. Waste, greenhouse gas inventory, LCA, life cycle cost, LEED, value stream mapping, which is Lean Six Sigma with sustainability, fuel, energy, water, waste, ISO 14000, training gap analysis, surveys, all of these things we've done. So that's just scratching the surface of the kind of audits that you might have. Has anybody been considering an audit that is different from some of these that we've talked about? Well, there are a lot of them, and we're going to also talk about a bunch more as we're going through here. And this is your first task here is, what is your question that you're trying to answer? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And what data do you need to gather to find out where they are right now? Because you want to know how your company is doing right now. So this is what the structure of the chapter is supposed to be. The first thing you're going to do is describe your audit process. You know, this is what you did. You looked at the billing data, you did a facility walkthrough, you did a survey, you gathered, you did a count of the different kinds of fixtures, lighting fixtures, water fixtures. You looked at the waste, you did a waste audit. So you need to describe the audit process that you used, and you need to use as many audits as you need in order to describe your company's current situation in your topic area. And just like ePortfolios, for each audit, you're going to describe the audit, citing your sources. You're going to graphically show the data and results in tables, charts, Ecomaps, all those kinds of things. And then you're going to discuss the results. Now that's just presenting the raw data, essentially. Then you need to analyze it, and analyze it using tools like a prioritization, problem analysis, things like fishbones, and graphically show that and then draw conclusions. So you have the audit data displayed like a line chart for a billing data, whatever. So it's still graphical, but then you want to do a deeper analysis. And we'll go into those in a little bit more depth. These are some of the types of audits that you'll be considering. And you don't have to do them all. You need to do the ones that are relevant. So we've already done the stakeholder analysis. So fortunately, you don't have to do that. But there are you can do a location analysis, you can do a process analysis, or you can do a gap analysis. And there are probably more, but those are kind of the major categories we're going to talk about tonight. So let's take a look at a location analysis. This can include things like anything that looks at the floor plan, looks at the facility, that looks at walking through and identifying what's where. And so it can be an Ecomap, it can be a waste audit, an energy and water audit. And by that, we're talking about where things are located as opposed to how they are used. How they are used would be a process audit. But where they are located and how many hours they're on and things like that, that's a location analysis. And you might use a checklist or a worksheet or something like that, an audit tool of some kind. What you're going to do is to somehow observe, count, and measure, and document. You can use photographs of different problem areas. You can use a floor plan that they provide to you, be an emergency, emergency escape plan, or you can draw your own. It can be tables, and of course, all kinds of charts and graphs and whatever. So talking through a few of the audits, remember how to do a waste audit. Stay safe, stay clean. Waste audits can be pretty nasty. And one of the things you want to think about is, do you need to do just one, or do you need to check on waste during a heavy day and a light day to see what the variation is, or even over 3 days, a heavy, light, and heavy, light, and average? You know, you may have to do it more than once, but you probably, unless you really want to, don't need to do it for 7 days. You can, but waste audits can be really nasty audits. And so, you know, I don't want you all to suffer more than you need to suffer to gather the data in order to do a baseline. Because what you're going to do, remember, is you're going to gather the data and then you're going to scale up to see, you know, to estimate how much waste there would be over the course of a year. You know, if you just do it once and it doesn't happen to be representative, then your results are going to be really, really skewed in the wrong direction. And so you've got to check with your stakeholders and try to find out, you know, what are the days that you should be doing this. Okay. You may do a facility walkthrough. In ASHRAE 90, or ASHRAE, they have a nice, very detailed workbook, essentially, or guide on how to do facility walkthroughs. And what you would probably be doing is a level 1 audit walkthrough. This happens to be for energy. You know, you're going to walk through the rooms and identify the different pieces of equipment, where they are, what uses energy, and things of that nature. And or you may use a water audit and trying to identify from your water bill how much is being used with each water type. So you would probably measure the water flow and estimate how much it's being used per day, and then identify, you know, of that, how does it fit into the water bill, and map out where the water uses are. We've done some eco-mapping in our classes, and so this is just a little reminder. And please do not invent your own way of doing it, in the sense that, or, you know, say, well, I'm going to use stars instead of the circles and hash marks. One of the things that we're trying to do is to show that you know how to do these tools in the way that the people out in the field are using them. And so use the symbols that are in use typically. And in this case, the hashed lines are small problems, circles are large problems, and the more serious the problem, the thicker the circle. And then you would, and remember, you describe first what is an eco map, then you do the eco map, and then you describe the results of it, draw conclusions from the results. It's a 4-step process to draw the floor plan, to document the uses, to estimate how many hours and all of that, and gather the data. You can do eco maps on a lot of things, a lot more than we did. It's not just energy and water and waste. It can also be transportation. It can be packaging. It can be raw materials. It can be nuisance, noise, odors, the use of land. So there are a lot of different things that you can use for eco maps. This is an example. You may remember it shows an eco map for water, and you can see the hash marks and the circles there. And then part of it is also to create an action plan of, once you're doing this, this would eventually become part of your recommendations there. But the action plan would be to reduce water in these certain areas or reduce energy use in these areas. And so you might want to take a look at that as you're going through. Now, a lot of you will also probably be using some kind of an audit checklist. And there are a ton of them out there. And I'll show you 2 or 3 examples of them. This one happens to be LEAD, Existing Buildings, Operations and Maintenance. And whatever you do, do not do them all, because there's no way that you can gather the data on all of them for, or even more than 1 or 2 of them. But, this is something that you can use and use the guides on those particular areas to gather the data that you need to gather. Now, you'll probably have to create a more detailed checklist or worksheet with that. Like, for instance, something like this. This is a behavior observations check sheet that shows how people are behaving. This particular one happens to show, in green, those things that are positive, and in black, those things that are negative. And if you're just doing energy, obviously you would just look at energy and do it over again, you might need to do them over a course of 5 days, or it might be sufficient to do it over 3 days. You also might want to use something like a worksheet. This happens to be an example of an energy worksheet. You remember these also from class, where you have the location, what's in there, the make and model, if it's needed, how many, the watts, the hours of day used, and then you scale up for the annual use, and you identify it as a major or a minor use. Because there's a couple different ways that you can show how energy is being used. You can show it on an Ecomap, and you can show it in a table like this. You can also show it in a Pareto chart. A number of students are now starting to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Energy Star Portfolio Manager does create some nice charts there. But be careful with those, because sometimes if you just snip the chart, it might not look as nice as if you were to do it yourself. But it at least can help your stakeholders continue this for the long term, which would be a recommendation that you would make to them in the continuous improvement chapter. And there are a lot of industry-specific kinds of checklists and audit tools. So, I've had students do an eco-dentistry audit. A lot of students do green restaurants. Here's some others: commercial cleaners, farms and vineyards, automotive repair, hospitality, e-waste, linen and uniform services. So one of the things that you probably want to do is to check and see if there is an industry-specific one for you, and whether or not you don't have to use it, but if it's something that you would find useful. Okay, the second kind of audit that you might do is a process analysis. And that's if they are using resources or generating waste at different steps in a process that they have, whatever that process is. So you might use this for analyzing billing, like a line chart that shows month by month. So you can usually see, hey, there's more energy used over the summer. I wonder why that is. So billing data amounts of water, electricity, waste. It can be, over the course of a month, or it can be over the course of a process that is repeated. So what you need to do is to understand the process, collect the data using check sheets or bills, and you can involve your stakeholders in helping you collect data if they're willing. If that's the case, you need to train them a little bit, make sure they're collecting it correctly. Then you need to choose the appropriate charts to display the data and then enter the data. So process flow charts, that's the first way to understand your process, and it can be a TQEM flow chart or value stream map. I'll show you those in a second. A good chart for measurement over time is a run or a control chart. A histogram if you need to show the variation in the process. And if you're doing a problem analysis, like a waste audit or some other kind of categorical problem analysis, then a Pareto is really useful. So if you're doing TQEM or TQSM, there are 7 basic tools. You do not have to use them all. You select the ones that are necessary. It includes a flow chart. This particular image of a flow chart, it goes side by side. Most of the ones that I see go, vertically. The key thing is that you want it to look professional. And so use something like Lucid Chart or some other nice tool, a nice program or app that will help you have the create the flow chart nicely. Because if you're just trying to aim it yourself, it's you're probably going to get feedback that you need to do it a little bit differently. But there's flow charts. This is an example of the check sheet. The histogram for frequency, that's also something we use for surveys a lot. The Pareto chart, scatter diagram if you're comparing 2 variables, and then control chart. And this bottom one that I'm covering up right now is a fishbone diagram. Okay, if you're doing a flow chart, a TQEM flow chart, you need to determine where to start and finish, identify the steps in the process, sequence them, and keep it simple. Again, please use the symbols that are traditional symbols. Don't make up your own because there are some very standard simple symbols that are in use. And you don't have to use them all. This is kind of like the basics, and even all of these are not absolutely necessary. The ovals at the front, at beginning and end, are the terminators. Each step is a rectangle. Each decision is a diamond. If all you do is those, it is plenty. Some students do a value stream map, and that can be really useful if you have whether it's an assembly line or something that happens over and over again, using a product, creating a product, doing something where there's step by step. And you may recall that there's, you have the you have the start, which is, the information or the resources coming in with whatever transportation method it is. And then at the end, that goes out to the customer or retail or whatever. Then you have your steps along the way. At each step, you have the inputs and the outputs of the waste, the resources used and wasted. These again, use the ones that are standard. These are useful for current maps, that they're here, here, and here. These are the starbursts are useful for potential improvement areas. This is an example of one that is done on water usage, and you see they also have this little castle diagram down at the bottom that has the amount of water used versus the amount of water needed at each step. Another thing you might do is a gap analysis. The gap analysis has, this is where we want to be in the future. This is where we are in the future. And then the next actions or proposals, but don't do the next actions or proposals now because that's in your recommendations chapter. So just, this is that you can just identify this as that there is a gap there. So you just want to highlight the gaps that exist and need to be filled. This is a nice example of one that has all of the different things that you're trying or the future state that you're trying to do and how or what the element is that you're evaluating, whether you're green, yellow, or red, and any comments that explain what it is there. This is something that is often done in a training gap analysis, where here's the objectives, the lesson objectives, or the course objectives, the job requirements. This is what's currently in place. And again, you can do this in red, yellow, and green, and then what's needed. Survey questions can be a very handy way to gather data, but you need to make sure that you're able to access the people that you want to survey. So if you have employees and your key stakeholder is willing to send something out with your survey on it that says, please do this survey, we're trying to figure out whatever, then you'll have a better chance of it being completed than if you send it out. The other thing is that the same thing is true whether I've had some students send it out to customers or that there's one at an auto repair place that had like a 3-question survey on a card and was able to gather data that way. So be sure that whatever survey tool that you use, that you are able to download the data, because there's 2 reasons. One is that you're being evaluated on how well you can clean up the data and create charts. And so you can't just use the charts that are provided by Google Forms. And the other thing is that none of those will actually do the kinds of analysis, all of the analysis that you really want to do. Okay, so once you've gathered the data and put them in tables and charts and whatever, then you need to kind of look at the big picture and say, okay, what is this telling me? You can use these kinds of charts. Some of the things that, the pie charts are descriptive. The histograms are also, they can be either just categorical or continuous data, but they give you a little bit more information. But some of the things that you can do to help make sense out of it are things like, what the mean is, what's the average, what's the range, what's the variation, the standard deviation. And fortunately, Excel will do standard deviation for you. If you do something like a histogram, you can look at the direction and shape of that histogram. That's called skewness and kurtosis. Kurtosis is how flat it is or peaked. And skewness is whether it's all the way on the right or all the way on the left, or it's a normal curve. And then you can also take a look at the meaningful difference. If there's a huge difference over, over the summer than over the rest of the year. Now, you also might be doing displaying your data in as prioritization. What are the most important problems to tackle? And you remember doing a Pareto chart. Well, this is a good use of it. There's also something that we didn't do in class, but I've seen a number of students do, and Excel will do this now. It's a new feature, and that is an amoeba chart. So you can play with that if you would like, and see if that gives you the kind of data if it displays the data in a way that helps you draw meaning. And if you're looking for cause and effect, then you can take a look at a fishbone. You've done those before, where you remember the effect is to waste something, to use too much energy, to waste water, to drive too many miles, whatever it is. And then the kinds of bones that you have. Don't use a steep. A steep is what we did in class, and that's more of a strategic planning tool where you look at the technological and the political and the environmental and all of that. The better way of doing the fishbone is to use something like the 4MPE, which is what are the people, is it 4M? Let me see, materials, methods, machines and measurement, people and environment. And that is a nice gathering. And you can go and look at Google fishbone diagrams, and you'll see all kinds of different choices of that. But again, what we're trying to do is do one that's more or less standard and gives you some of the ideas of what might be causing this, because that then helps you take a look at the best practices, which is the chapter after this. What you want to be able to do is to identify the biggest areas of problems so that you can say, okay, that's where my biggest problem is. Now I need to look and see who has solved this. What are the best practices in doing this better? And so what you want to end up with at the end of the chapter is several ideas of that will lead to your best practices. Not very many students use scatter diagrams, but again, if you're looking at cause and effect, if you're looking to see if one variable is causing another variable, then a scatter diagram can be helpful for that. And of course, control charts are useful to see if there's if your process is out of control, or if it's varying enough that you need to be looking at the causes of that. And if you look at a control chart or a run chart, you can take a look at how much it varies over time. So run chart, this is especially useful if you have your baseline, then you make a change and you want to see if it has an effect over time. And so run charts are very useful for that. Control charts are really useful for seeing whether the process is in control or whether it's changing. And what it has is these upper control limits and lower control limits are standard deviation lines. And if you have 3 standard deviations, that accounts for 99% of the variation. If you do an interview, you want to do a qualitative analysis of either if you do a survey or interviews, you want to do a qualitative analysis of those to find meaningful groupings so that you can actually have some findings that you have there. So this is the most common thing that people talked about. Excuse me. And so in class, we did a content analysis and we did a grounded theory analysis. And you don't have to do both. If you do both, you can triangulate and see what shows up in both. And then you can also look at a systems evaluation. The systems evaluation you can do with archetypes with the 5th discipline. This is things like the tragedy of the commons, limits to growth. There's a lot of interesting archetypes, and you can study how to do those. We actually didn't do those in class, but you're welcome to. I think we did have at least a reading on it, and you're welcome to take a look at that. The other thing is if you're looking at the flow charts with TQEM or TQSM, you're going to identify the places in the flow chart that are critical, and then determine what you should measure going through here: resource use, process accuracy, or quality. And so that will help you, again, know what to measure and how to make sense of it. In next week's folder, there are short little, I think they're usually about 10 to 15 minutes, folders on, videos and slides on reminding you how to do each one of these charts. So if you don't remember how to do a histogram, or you don't remember how to do one of the other charts, there are little videos. If you don't remember how to do a qualitative analysis, there are little workshops on each one of those. So with that, I will see if anybody has any questions. Questions?
I think I'm good for tonight. I just need to process all the information you just gave us.
Yeah, I know how that is.
Same over here. Looking forward to watching this tomorrow morning again, and I'm going to reserve my questions for our session on Wednesday, I believe.
Okay.
Yes,
absolutely. That's
I agree.
Yeah,
I
that's a good
second
thing.
Johnny.
So be thinking about what, that hopefully you already have some idea of what audits that you're going to do. If not, that's obviously the first thing that you want to do is get whatever checklists, whatever worksheets, whatever, facilities, walkthroughs, all of those things. You want to determine that first. Actually, no, the first thing you want to determine is what is it that you're trying to measure? What is the problem that you're trying to identify? So look at that critical thinking thing. What is the purpose of your audit? What is the question you are trying to answer? What data do you need? And then once you gather the data, you can ask yourself questions on how to interpret it. Okay? Anything else? I will stop.
No, I think we're good.
I will stop.